All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I have to give Antonio Brown a bit of credit. Sometimes you can be crazy and sometimes you can act crazy. You can act crazy like a fox to get what you want and manipulate the situation, manipulate your environment. Back in 1964, right before Muhammad Ali, at that time Cassius Clay, squared off against Sonny Liston in the build-up to the fight, he acted as if he was crazy. He took his tour bus over to Liston's estate in Las Vegas, actually drove his bus up on Liston's lawn, jumped out of his bus, yelled, screamed, shouted into his bullhorn. Liston came out the house mad as hell. Ali would follow him, or Cassius Clay at the time would follow him into certain casinos in Las Vegas and harass him. Just wanted to act like he was crazy. And it did permeate into the subconscious mind of Sonny Liston that this dude will do anything. So I have to be very wary of what he might try in the ring. And all the way up to the weigh-in, and especially at the weigh-in, Cassius Clay's behavior was so quote-unquote unsettling that many members of the boxing media thought that he was scared to death of Sonny Liston, when in fact what he was trying to do was intimidate Liston, because he had heard that Liston was extremely frightened by insane people, or cats who are quote-unquote touched. For those of you brothers who read the scriptures in 1 Samuel, the 21st chapter, King David actually tries to act as if he's insane when he's brought before the king of Gath, one of the Philistine kings, because he did not want the king to understand what his real purpose was. Point being is this: sometimes you can act a certain way to make sure that you get what you want. Certain people, if they're shrewd enough and have enough foresight, can utilize chicanery and Machiavellian tactics to position themselves to get what they need out of a certain scenario or situation at that time. And Antonio Brown did just that very successfully, trying to play crazy to force the Pittsburgh Steelers to trade him. Not only to trade him, but to trade him to the team that he wanted to go to, or one of the teams that he appears to have wanted to go to, that being the Oakland Raiders. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Welcome back to First Take, coming to you live from the Seaport District at Pier 17, brought to you by Chase. The NFL's most high-profile divorce is finalized. Pittsburgh agreeing to trade Antonio Brown to Oakland. The Raiders are trading a third round and a fifth round pick to the Steelers while also redoing Brown's contract. Brown now will have a 3-year deal with the Raiders worth $50+ million and $30+ million in guaranteed money.
Also keep in mind that John Gruden was the coach of the Oakland Raiders when the great Jerry Rice departed from San Francisco and came to Oakland. So John certainly seems to be someone who likes older wide receivers. I'm sure that he's not going to try to push Antonio Brown to make too many game-breaking plays. He just wants to evaluate what he can do at first, and once he sees that Antonio can still do everything, then he'll try to push the envelope. But John Gruden certainly seems to be a coach who likes older wide receivers who are experienced.
Money, the Steelers will be forced to swallow $21 million in change in dead money against the salary cap. Will Kane joins the conversation.
What's up?
Well,
What's up? Good morning.
How we doing?
I'm good.
Good to have you with us. Was this AB trade more about the Browns or the Steelers?
I think it means more about the Raiders or the Steelers. And I think that this trade was about neither team. It was about Antonio Brown. Once again, he showed some level of understanding on how to manipulate his environment. Sometimes you can make a situation so untenable for everyone involved that their only recourse is to get rid of you as soon as possible, especially with the amount of clout that athletes have today through social media. The only way that Pittsburgh was going to be able to maintain their standing and their reputation as an upright organization in the NFL would be to jettison Antonio Brown, because this had never happened to their organization in the past. We've never seen a player associated with the Steelers who went out of his way to make himself the show or to make himself the focus of the team until Antonio Brown. So it's not a surprise that they chose to remove him as soon as possible, because the team was not a championship contender with him. So do they really need him right now? They can build around Juju, develop him, and draft another wide receiver.
It wasn't about the Cleveland Browns, if you mean the Browns plural. It was about Antonio Brown.
Excuse me, sorry. Yes. Antonio Brown.
No, it was 100% in its entirety about Antonio Brown. The Steelers are simply pawns in this entire equation. You can tell me.
Well, they're probably pawns, but I also do believe that there's some credence to what Antonio Brown was alleging about Big Ben. I do think that he disliked Big Ben, and Big Ben probably disliked him as well. I have very little doubt about that, because what other reason would there be for for your star quarterback to go out of his way to say that Antonio Brown ran the wrong route, and that's why he threw an interception. I mean, I can't remember, and I've been watching football since 1990, hard body, 1989, 1990. I cannot remember ever hearing a quarterback go out of his way to try to shit on his receiver like Ben Roethlisberger went out of his way to do to Antonio Brown this season, especially a wide receiver of his caliber. Okay, Antonio Brown, once again, in my view, he's the second greatest wide receiver that I've ever seen. A lot of cats disagree with that. You got the Randy Moss people out there. You got the, whoever, Marvin Harrison and a whole bunch of other guys, Julio Jones. Antonio Brown, when it just comes to route running, being able to run every route on the route tree, being able to run past his defender, more than one defender, game break, make big catches, Antonio Brown, man, he's right there with anybody other than Jerry that I've seen.
You can try to convince me there was a coincidence that the year that Antonio Brown goes from $0 in guarantees, his contract finally expires in terms of its guaranteed money. You can tell me the year that he is officially one of the most underpaid wide receivers in the NFL, scheduled to be something like 15, then 12, and so forth, $1 million. All coincidentally coincides with when he gets into it with Ben Roethlisberger, when he gets into it with Mike Tomlin, when he has a problem with the Rooneys.
Well, here's the issue with that theory. Antonio Brown has had problems with Mike Tomlin for a few years now. And the issues that he had with Ben Roethlisberger have persisted over the course of this entire season. And many of those problems were started by Big Ben.
When he has a problem with every single aspect of the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. It just all coincidentally aligned in this one season. No. The Steelers were held hostage 100% by Antonio Brown's contract desires, Drew Rosenhaus's successful negotiation. And make no mistake, Antonio Brown won. I recognize that. And by the way, it wasn't just the Steelers that were the pawns. The Buffalo Bills, and any other team that was interested in Antonio Brown. He essentially was like a poison pill when a business takes a poison pill to ward off other companies that wants to have a hostile takeover, perform a hostile takeover of their stock. You depress, and in the stock world, you increase your price, but in this case, he depressed his own value. I mean, I don't want to be inflammatory here, but it's like a suicide bomber. He was willing to take down the entire organization in order for his own individual benefit. And
well, that's hyperbole on a Max Kellerman level. No, Antonio Brown was not trying to take down the entire organization. All he did was demand a trade. When you're trying to take down an entire organization, that's what someone does when they have secret files on a VP, on a CEO, on the president of the organization. All he did was demand a trade. Now, I agree with you. He did try to purposefully depress his value so that certain teams might lose interest, and who knows, maybe behind the scenes he was communicating with John Gruden to let him know that he wanted to come out there to the Bay Area and that a lot of what he was doing was just for the cameras. Either way, I would say that this contention or this notion that Antonio Brown was trying to destroy the entire Pittsburgh Steelers organization, that's an exaggeration to say the least.
Understand up close why it looks like that. You're not wrong if you want to say, how did this happen? You described it accurately. Because the Steelers, and you've made this point and others have, you can't pay as much money. You can't pay 10% or plus of your salary cap to a receiver and win the Super Bowl. It's really hard. But what about paying someone else 10% of your salary cap to pay the receiver to play for them? That's even harder. You're not even getting his production, so they really wanted him off the team. He succeeded in doing his thing. Here's the problem.
Well, I agree with you that they definitely wanted Antonio Brown off the team. And I believe that the reason why they were so desperate, or why they ended up acquiescing to Antonio Brown telling them that he wants to be traded, is because the Pittsburgh Steelers are a lot about optics. The Steelers, the Green Bay Packers, the New York Giants, they don't want any controversy to be associated with their franchises at all. At all. The Chicago Bears as well. A lot of those grandfather franchises, they don't want any type of controversy associated with them. It's like someone who, someone who does not want the neighbors to know that their family has a lot of issues. As soon as that stuff starts to get out, we got to head to therapy because we don't want to lose our standing in the neighborhood.
Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, two different agents. Rosenhaus and Bakari is Le'Veon Bell's agent. Right? Two different agents, same result. The Steelers are left with a third-round pick, as Stephen A. pointed out earlier, for a special, all-world, all-time great Hall of Famer in his prime skills position guy.
Right, but Max Kellerman, you have to evaluate it like this. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're saying to yourself, well, you're going to mock us for attaining a 3rd round and a 5th round draft pick for Antonio Brown. Well, we drafted Antonio in the 6th round. So we've shown by our history that we know how to find receivers and we know how to build them up. So that's not an issue for the Pittsburgh Steelers. What Max Kellerman is getting at is, and the reason why the Steelers held the fort or always hold the fort so hard against players and player rights and contractual rights is because they know that they have to set the stage for the next CBA negotiations. They have to make sure that they don't allow any precedents to get created on their watch that might have a trickle-down effect during the next collective bargaining agreement sit-downs. Because the players have been heavily inspired by the NBA, and they're going to try to roll hard body into the next CBA negotiations, and the owners have to let it be known that we're going to draw a very hard line in the sand.
Going to get you. But here's how we can get paid, even though we're in a disadvantage. We can use leverage like sitting out a season. Like being a poison pill for your franchise. We can do that. And what the Steelers have done here, and I identified it with Le'Veon Bell first. No, to hell with this iteration of our team. We are going to draw a line in the sand for our franchise. Players, you think you're going to submarine our season? Wrong. Because we will shoot ourselves in the foot in order to prove the point. Going forward, if you play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this won't fly. The problem is there are 31 other teams. This will work. If you are, Louis Riddick pointed out earlier, Stephen A., you got to be a special skills position player. But if you're specially talented, you can do things to force the NFL someone.
Not just especially talented, Max Kellerman. If you make sure that your financial coffers have been maintained to the level where you can sit out a whole season or 2 seasons, then yes, you can do this. And what it will do is it will force many of these owners and GMs to think twice before they try to play hardball with you. Because now they'll know, okay, we might lose this asset for the entire year, and there's a backup who we think might be decent, but he's not going to bring anywhere close to what the starter is bringing to the table. The starter who's trying to haggle with us over another, $5 or $6 million. We're paying the backup $500K, and the backup is nowhere near as good, but maybe we can mask it for a while to maintain this facade that the players are all expendable. The players are starting to understand that, at least the creme de la creme, that they're not expendable, and as long as they have enough money to hold them over for a year, or maybe even more than a year, they can make this power play and it can work.
Someone in the NFL will pay you what you're worth. You can do things to do it, and that's what's happening here.
Here's the deal. All y'all points are accurate. I'm not gonna belabor that. I will say this. It's taking a different angle. Drew Rosenhaus did a sensational job with this. It's just no other way to slice it. To go from 0 guaranteed dollars within the framework or the same remaining contract. It's not like he got a contract extension for years.
Right, but Stephen A., I mean, how tremendous of a job did he really do? He's the agent for arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. It's almost like someone who, they might be a celebrity and they were formerly married. And maybe they've hit on some hard times because they're paying too much alimony. And now they've linked up with a new woman who is allowing him to live on her dime. Is it truly that the celebrity was able to make these great decisions that put him in the position where a woman could take care of him? Or was it that the woman was just so desperate to finally, engage in a relationship with her favorite male celebrity that it was going to happen regardless? My point being is this: there's a sucker born every minute. Antonio Brown and his agent knew that there were going to be some teams out there who will be willing to pay him for his services, because there are a lot of teams out there that are looking to make a splash, the Oakland Raiders being one of them. So I can't give too much credit to Antonio Brown's agent, Drew Rosenhaus.
Years on top of it. No, basically under the guise of this contract that you signed years ago, with the expiration, as you pointed out, Will, of the guaranteed dollars, the guaranteed portion of it all. Drew Rosenhaus went out and got the man $30 million in guaranteed money. $30 million. I mean, right now, if I'm DeMaurice Smith for the NFL Players Association, I better hope that Drew Rosenhaus don't want my job, because I don't know anybody that's looked out for a player to this degree like this.
Go live in Vegas instead of Pittsburgh.
Hold on, just this point, Stephen A. This was not Rosenhaus alone, because Rosenhaus had to have leverage. And the leverage that was created by Antonio Brown's willingness to throw the Steelers under the bus.
Stop right there. Let me help you out there.
Yeah.
The leverage was also created by Antonio Brown's very apparent willingness to sit out next season. That's obviously, to me, the reason why the Steelers felt like they were going to be forced to trade him, because they couldn't go back-to-back seasons with their best players sitting out for the entire year. It's very obvious that there are some things that went on in the conversations between Antonio Brown and the Rooneys, or Antonio Brown and the Pittsburgh GM, that let them know that they were going to have another Le'Veon Bell situation on their hands. And if they did not move Antonio Brown, it was going to put a major black eye on their organization that might affect them down the line, and the possibilities of signing free agents, things of that nature. So they did not want to have this 2 years in a row.
I was a reporter in Philly with Drew Rosenhaus representing T.O. Same strategy was employed. T.O. wanted out. Philadelphia pushed him out, exiled him. He ended up signing with the Cowboys. Okay? This is what T.O. wanted. He wanted out. So now, as I'm thinking about it, I understand the player has to be a willing participant. Of course, the agent can only do but so much. But make no mistake about it, Drew Rosenhaus got his fingerprints all over this stuff. Now we look at Antonio Brown. I really, really believe, as I've said earlier, that there's a legitimate argument that can be made. That all of this, it wasn't about throwing the quote-unquote the team under the bus. I think you might have had some players that were in on it. Big Ben Roethlisberger. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we find out down the line Big Ben Roethlisberger was in on this all along. Go ahead.
I doubt it, dude. What part of the game is that Big Ben Roethlisberger wants other players to go on the national airways, whether it be TV and radio, and lambaste him as a leader? Like, do you see what's being done to Big Ben Roethlisberger? There are players who are accusing him of fumbling on purpose. There are players who are accusing him of all types of dastardly things. Stephen A., no. Don't believe the seemingly quote-unquote outlandish conjecture to people like me. Because at least I can substantiate it with components that are substantive and make sense. What you're saying makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, honestly, once again, what part of the game is that where Big Ben Roethlisberger will want to go back and forth with Antonio Brown just to justify Antonio Brown getting his money somewhere else? No. Big Ben is not a magnanimous individual on that level where he's that concerned about a major part of his offense getting paid somewhere else. Nah. And then the collateral damage is supposed to be that he takes all these hits in the mainstream media? Nah, bro, it makes no sense. He's being attacked everywhere.
Go ahead and dog me. Go ahead and say whatever you got to say. We're going to get you paid. I know you want your money, my brother. I appreciate everything you did for me, whatever. What did Bill Barnwell in this column say? From 2013 to 2016, Brown averaged 120 catches, 1,578 yards, 11 touchdowns per season. Go.
Exactly. So, according to your theory, Big Ben wants all that production gone just so that Antonio Brown can get his money somewhere else. Okay. Big Ben, the same guy who threw Le'Veon Bell under the bus because he held out the season for trying to get his money and seemed to coach up the offensive line into turning against Le'Veon Bell. Nah, bro, it's not. I'm not buying what you're selling.
Went a long way towards making
Why
Big Ben
would Ben
Roethlisberger.
do that,
I'm just saying something, because in the NFL you have players that are willing to band together because they detest the system and it's margin. Oh yes,
but
that
not
doesn't
here,
get,
not now, not this.
No. I don't know. I'm not saying I know that. I'm not even saying I heard
Why wouldn't
that.
you want?
Well, we know that you haven't heard it and that you don't know it, bro, because what you're saying makes no sense.
You want your brothers in arms to get
I'm
paid.
just saying. Think about
That-
it. It does. I'm
that's
saying,
not unreasonable.
Will, this way. It's not beyond. It's not beyond the
Get
realm.
him paid by another team. Did he
Thank you, Will Kane.
think his own team would fold under this pressure?
Wait a minute. It actually works best because if you Big Ben and you wouldn't mind being with him being gone because he's complaining about his money all the time, but there's a way to facilitate him getting out the door, getting his money while at the same time you being rid of him. You just never know. I'm just saying. I've seen worse things conjured up in the world of sports.
I know
That's
you're
all I'm
just
trying to say.
saying,
And I'm just saying. I'm not
I can't buy
reporting.
that
I'm not reporting
at
it. I haven't heard it. I'm just saying, as I sat back and watched this news percolate, that's the thing that came to my mind. We gonna find out that Big Ben probably was in on this all along.
Oh, Will, the
That's
reason
what
you
I'm
had that
thinking.
reaction
That's what.
You know what, Steve? Your theory would make more sense if Big Ben had a history of actually caring about other people. He doesn't. He doesn't. And they're just... there are too many factors that would need to be at play and that would need to line up in order for your theory to make any sense at all. how would it help Big Ben to get rid of one of his best receivers? He's 38 years old, 37 years old. He needs to win. He does not have time for other receivers to develop. They were able to find a diamond in the rough in Juju Smith-Schuster. But Antonio Brown is one of the best weapons in the league. I would understand it more maybe if Big Ben were 10 or 12 years younger. But at 37, 38 years old, he needs all the weapons that he can get. And this is not something that Big Ben needs for his quote-unquote brand, if he's intent on maintaining his brand. To have players from everywhere calling him a bad leader, bringing up his criminal history, claiming or alleging that he was actually trying to fumble or turn the ball over on purpose because he did not like an offensive play call from Todd Haley. Like, come on.
What I'm thinking.
Like, fans live, and some even in the media, I'm not saying this, but it applies to all of us really, live in a fantasy world where we think winning the chip is so important to these guys. I've asked many players, usually when
I agree with that. Winning the chip is really only important to certain players in the NBA or the NFL. Players who know that their legacy is going to be directly correlated with how many championships they won. But the vast majority of players in the NBA and the NFL, they don't give a shit if they win a championship.
when I say you never won a championship,
Don't pay bills.
how much of your career earnings would you sacrifice to win a championship? The highest I think I've heard is like 5%.
Yes.
Like, it's marginal. Okay. They care about the money like everyone.
I think you confuse the nature of selfishness. It applies to you, not to other people.
I'm talking about
Ben
people I've had
Roethlisberger is
conversations with.
interested in his money, not Antonio Brown's, nor interested in sacrificing his winning, his chips, or the city of Pittsburgh's chips for Antonio Brown's money.
That's not.
Thank you, sir. Agree.
That's not what's
And
happening.
Let me correct you on
that's
that.
what
No, that actually is what Stephen A. Smith implied. That might not be what he directly said, but that's what he implied. That Big Ben Roethlisberger is so concerned with Antonio Brown getting his money that he's willing to throw himself in front of a train for Antonio Brown to get his money. I mean, come on, man. Knock it off.
why Ben Roethlisberger
Time.
wouldn't do this.
Let me help you out here. I respect where you're coming from, seriously. But I got to tell you, I'm not joking. I'm in all seriousness. If ever there were a league where players care about other dudes' money, it's the NFL. Because you do have an awful lot. And I'm not saying that's applicable
If they
here.
cared
I
about-
suspect.
A segment like this, they should have had Ryan Clark or another football player. Because the issue is that Stephen A. Smith he's just going off the cuff on some nonsense. And these other two guys, they don't really have enough to combat what he's saying. And Marx Kellerman, the super liberal Luciferian, he loves that idea of someone trying to get involved in helping someone else get their money and all this other stuff. So he's not really going to come against it. Will Cain's the only person on the panel talking sense. So they really should have had an NFL player in on this segment.
If they
But
cared-
I'm just telling you, there are players that look at how they could go back to the Twitter feeds. Look at what people say. Every time there's some issue with money that pops up with a player in the National Football League, you got players up in arms because they're lamenting the state of affairs that exists, the dichotomy that exists, or the imbalance that exists with the owners compared to the players.
If they cared,
it matters.
hold on now. If they cared about their brother's money, they would care more about the guaranteed money at the lower ends of the wage spectrum, not just among the stars. You can't sell me on this.
Those guys are
on this,
replaceable.
on this utopian vision of the NFL where they're willing to sacrifice for each other.
Agreed.
Hold on really quick, because this is important.
Sure.
Not
a sacrifice,
You
though, but go
compliment
ahead.
Drew Rosen.
No, that is a sacrifice. Because Big Ben is not just somebody who is allowing Antonio Brown to say quote unquote bad things about him. He's having a lot of his character impugned by these other players, Stephen A. Smith. What you're saying is way too far-fetched. I will believe it more, once again, if there was a precedent for Big Ben to show that he was someone who actually cared about others. But his character archetype is not that at all. Not only does he not have a magnanimous character archetype, he actually has a pseudo-sadistic character archetype where he enjoys inflicting pain on others in a myriad of ways, right? Allegedly.
Rosenhaus. And I think he deserves a ton of credit here in terms of winning the financial battle. But Antonio Brown did something that I hope actually will be unique, because he depressed the value of his own stock so much that the Steelers had to make a calculation. We have to get rid of him. Even if all we get
So
back is
Kyrie
a
Irving
third
will.
and a
It's
fifth.
not- it's not
Hold on,
you.
Max, I want to come back to you. Even if we only get a third and a fifth. Now that's unique. You can point to Kyrie in the NBA, but we're talking about the NFL here. For
Agreed.
him to take down his value, the franchise's view of him is so It's
his
the
value
first time.
according to the
Now
team,
listen,
in
here's
terms
the
of
deal.
the team's compensation, not his own.
Yeah, that's my point.
Not his own?
That's my point.
Okay.
And so you brought up what the lesson is for other players, other stars. Now I want to say this, and I'm not looking for the most inflammatory, I saw you cringe earlier, Molly, the most inflammatory analogy. I honestly can't think of a better one. Max, you talked
When
about...
did I cringe? Suicide
When
bomber?
I said the suicide bomber, I don't know.
Sorry.
But I don't care, Max. I really don't care about political correctness or other people's
Not about
cringing.
political
It's
correctness.
the best analogy I can come up with. Maybe it's my own limitations. I'm happy to accept that. Here's the thing. Teams will have to make a calculation that you just basically said, which is we do not negotiate with terrorism. We will not do this. You can sit out. You can do what Le'Veon did, but we're not selling you for a third and a fifth. It's the only way this Le'Veon Bell, this Antonio Brown thing doesn't become the model of the day.
I know, by the way, I also chafe under the kind of political correctness where you can't use an apt analogy because it can be unpopular, but in certain cases I think...
Give me a better one. Give me a better one.
I will say this. I will say that you could say take them hostage maybe, but I would say...
That's the same thing, dude. Anyway, Max Kellerman, he's another super liberal who tries to act as if he's against political correctness. The concept of political correctness is firmly based on that paradigm of liberal equals respect for others, and everything outside of liberal is disrespect for others. So he's sipping from the same poisonous cup that he claims he does not want other people to drink from. So he's full of shit. That's why Will Cain is making that silly face. He's like, dude, it's the same thing. Take a hostage, it's the same thing as terrorists.
I would say this.
The same thing.
Not exactly. I will engage with the point. I'll engage with that point. That is a successful strategy for players. I would recommend it if I were their agents.
That's only a successful strategy for the creme de la creme of players who not only have an insane amount of belief in themselves, but also have enough cash that they could sit out a season. And that's why Antonio Brown made it be known that he will retire, or that he can retire. He was trying to intimidate Pittsburgh into moving him.
This is a TV show that we watch. The idea that there's athletic competition and the athletes care, of course, is important to fans of those teams. But it is a TV show that we're watching, the most successful one. And any actor on any even successful TV show, if they can get twice as much money or tens of millions of dollars extra, of course they would want off. And the strategy has long been in sports that the basic threat, the implicit threat, is that the player can turn themselves into a distressed asset, lowering their value, and what the teams can get for them if the team...
Well, the real threat has really always been that the player can start to dictate to the franchise what he wants to do and where he wants to go because he's getting paid so much money. That's really the point of salary caps. Salary caps are not really to stop... it's not really to stop players from making money. It's really to stop players from accruing enough power where they can dictate to owners. This is the problem that they're having right now in the NBA. And a lot of people are not talking about this, but they're reaching a point where the owners are going to have to do something drastic to try to regain control over player movement. Because if you cannot control player movement, then you cannot sell to the fans that they should be all in on a particular player. When you assign a player to a franchise and that player is indelibly linked to that franchise, that allows the fan to become more entrenched in the saga of the team. Because sports, once again, as Max Kellerman already has stated, and as I've stated numerous times, is entertainment. And entertainment is built on narrative. People need narratives. They need storylines to get enraptured. When you're enraptured by something, that means that you're all in, you're invested. That means that everybody has something to gain from it. The owners need that narrative to be something that the fans can grab a hold of. If the fans don't believe that a player is going to stay with the team for at the very least over the course of his first contract, they might start to tap out. That means TV ratings go down. That means revenue goes down.
Teams are going after your quarterback, going after your coach, and going after your owner. You have talked about the effect on Mike Tomlin. You have to look at the effect on everybody. That's collateral damage in this entire equation. And while you might advise that to players, by the way, it'd be the correct advice because Antonio Brown won, what would be your advice to the teams? It would be, do not cave to the pressure.
No, I would tell teams that what it indicates is sometimes you can't cave to the pressure. For example, maybe they felt Le'Veon Bell, we just can't pay a running back. Sometimes you can't. But really what the players are saying is, work with me, guys. if I want out, trade me now while I still have the value, or else this is the implicit threat.
Last point.
Yeah.
You're right in terms of the organization. What would you say? You'd tell the organization, you'd encourage them not to cave. The flip side to it, however, is that when it comes to NFL players, I assure you there are an abundance of people in the league that are incredibly happy that Antonio Brown appears to have won, because unlike baseball with guaranteed dollars, unlike the NBA with the guaranteed dollars, the fact that the NFL has the system that it has in place, that is something that the players, unfortunately, because of their financial circumstances.
And Mike Tomlin is just collateral damage.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, that.
Not only is Mike Tomlin collateral damage, so is Big Ben. And that's how you know, Stephen A. Smith, that the sentiment that you're putting out that Big Ben was Confederate and Antonio Brown pursuing a trade is just baseless. It makes no sense. But there will be there will be a reckoning on this, because the NBA owners are going to get back at the NBA players for some of their machinations, especially inspired by LeBron James. The NFL owners are definitely going to try to bring in some draconian reforms during that next collective bargaining agreement negotiation. There's no doubt about it.
And that's a shame.
That is
a real damn shame.
And nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying it's not a shame.
All right.
But it's predictable.
We all agree AB won $30 million guaranteed, and he really won because he gets to live in Vegas. Plethora of taxes.
I don't know about
he won't
that.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. I don't know how Jalen Rose puts up with this broad. She must be bringing a lot to the table off camera. But anyway, congratulations to Antonio Brown. His trickery worked. So peace.